Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
It's the rumbling sound of God. All right, welcome, welcome. It's so wonderful to be here with you. And now I get to turn around and I get to see all of you, and that's wonderful too. And thank you to Lynn and Reverend Kathy and Suzanne and Jack for giving me such a warm welcome at your center. Believe it or not, Lighthouse is the first center outside of Santa Rosa in California that I've spoken at. So, because no surprise, Dr. Edward keeps me pretty busy. But I'm really thrilled to be here and to talk about oysters. Yeah. So the first oyster that I want to talk about today is actually when I first started playing electric guitar. And I was 17 years old when I first started playing. And like everyone who first learns this instrument finds out, my hands were not prepared for the abuse I was about to put them through. I didn't have any calluses on my fretting hand, and my strumming hand, my wrist, all those muscles, I had to build them up. I had to teach my hands how to do something new, and it was painful for those first few months. But I kept at it. And I'm glad that I kept at it and that I cultivated that tenacity within myself, because my willingness to work through that pain, knowing that there was a positive outcome over the horizon, allowed me to get to where I am today. Clearly, it was the right decision because I kept doing it. And I'm 41 years old now, so it's a major part of my life, and it's a way that I get to share my own authentic self with the world. And that was one of my oysters. So let's talk about that oyster. Why do I call that one of my oysters? Well, the humble oyster. Now, I don't think that oysters are really aware that the pearls that they create are beautiful to us weird humans. And I don't think that really they know. I don't want to ascribe more to them than what's happening here, but they do this really beautiful thing, right? They get a grain of sand stuck inside of them. And they don't have opposable thumbs. They can't just toss that grain of sand away. They can't make it go away. They have no choice but to accept that grain of sand that is irritating them. So what's fascinating is they start to make that grain of sand a part of themselves. And layer by layer, through their own essence, they coat it, and they coat it, and they coat it, so that it is less irritating. It's less something other than themselves. And pretty soon, we get this beautiful pearl, which I am assuming, I'm not an oyster, I don't know what oysters think, but I'm assuming the oyster thinks, well, this is actually pretty okay now. Not having that grimy piece of sand stuck in me, because now it's a pearl, now it's smooth, and it's part of the oyster. So there's a powerful acceptance in that, isn't there? Like, it has to accept that grain of sand. Now, the core of this idea that we can transform that which irritates us, that which is challenging in our life, that which sometimes feels unsolvable, the core spiritual principle that I found for this that works really well is the spiritual principle of non-dualism. Now, in science of mind communities, we know this as the principle of oneness. The idea that there actually isn't anything separate from us, even though on the surface it might seem that way. So non-dualism is maybe a more technical way of talking about all of these ancient wisdom teachings. We heard a little bit of what author Locke Kelly had to say about that in his reading. But what's also really cool, this is where I get excited, is that modern science also shows us that we're really not so separate. The fundamental parts that make up the very fabric of reality itself, including us, including us, those parts are always interconnected. They're always interrelated. There's never a moment when they are not in relationship with each other. Wow, isn't that something? So what that shows us is that even though we might seem to experience a world that is separate from us, we are in fact inextricably interconnected to the very fabric of the universe itself. We are connected not just to everyone here in this room, but to the furthest galaxy in our universe. So, let's go back to those oysters. And that oyster, we know when it's presented with that irritating grain of sand, it starts to wrap it in its own essence. It sees something that is other than itself. But rather than getting rid of it because it simply can't, it makes it a part of itself. And so us humans, we get invited to do something similar, don't we? We're not going to create literal pearls. I don't think so anyway. But we do have an opportunity to tap into that wisdom within us of our non-dual self. And that non-dual self, because that non-dual self is compassion, is loving kindness, is wholeness, that becomes the wrapper that makes those irritations in our life a little bit less irritating, that makes the feeling of separation a little bit less. So in a way, I would argue that until we do our work to awaken that non-dual self within us, those irritants in our life, they're going to keep on irritating us until they get our attention enough where we recognize that, oh, I can't keep this separate from me any longer. I need to try something new. And so my own personal experience with that, well, I worked in IT for about 15 years. And in my previous career working in IT, I have to admit I was very task-oriented. I like to get stuff done. And I wanted to complete my team's tasks as efficiently and effectively as I possibly could. Sometimes I didn't really care who I bowled over to get that done. I'm not super proud of that aspect of my past, but I gained the reputation in my office of being kind of a jerk. And I laugh about it now because I'm like, oh boy, wow, I look back at that guy, I'm like, that guy had some interesting ideas about life. Anybody relate to that? Yeah. So the problem is that in IT, oftentimes, this is kind of like an unspoken rule in IT that we accept the challenging personalities because they're really good at the work that they do. And I was one of those ones who was really good at the work, so people just kind of tolerated the fact that I was a jerk, but they shouldn't have. I wish they wouldn't have, because I needed a little bit of their irritation reflected back to me so that I would know that, oh, this is how I'm showing up in the world. The beauty of the non-dual self, as I started to awaken it in myself, as I continue to, because it's an ongoing process, is that I look back now through the lens of that non-dual self and I think, man, I could have made my life so much easier. And I could have made the lives of everybody that I worked with so much easier. And I wouldn't have not gotten the work done. I still would have gotten the work done. I probably would have gotten more work done, if I'm being perfectly honest. That's the power of the non-dual self, being able to recognize how we can smooth over those ways of being that maybe aren't working, or to accept the ways of being that others might be in that are irritating us. My problem back then is that I simply was unaware of that core part of me, that non-dual self that can't know separateness. I saw around me everything was separate. People were different. They were other. They were something to be, at best manipulated, so that I could get what I wanted. Oftentimes I did that through my broken defense mechanisms. And if you stick around today, we are going to be doing a workshop at 12:15, talking a little bit more about the defense mechanisms that we employ in life and how we can move through them and how we can build a relationship with them. You'll notice I said didn't get rid of them. We're not going to get rid of them. We're going to build a relationship with them. So each one of us has at the core of our being this non-dual self. It's not something we have to go out and get. It's already there. Some traditions call it the witness consciousness. It's that part of us that is pure awareness. Awareness without thinking, without labeling, without judging. What's really cool about this awareness is that it's also aware that it's aware. Our friend Ernest Holmes called this non-dual self many names. One of them was the thing itself. He'd call it spirit, God, the universe. He had many names for it, but ultimately he's tying us back to this aspect of our mind, our being, that cannot feel separate. Moreover, this is that aspect of our own inner divinity that we are connecting to when we are doing affirmative prayer, when we're doing spiritual mind treatment. The idea is that when we truly remember, I am remembering, when we truly remember that wholeness that's already within us, everything becomes easier. You know, I've spoken with some spiritual practitioners in our movement who say, you know, sometimes I only need to do the first 2 steps. I just recognize the divine. I just unify with the divine, and that's all I need to do because the rest of it takes care of itself. Isn't that fascinating? Also, I think Ernest knew the power in this because he said that we have to embody his teaching. He didn't say, he actually goes, in the introduction, he goes through this whole idea that, wow, it's really easy to talk about this stuff, isn't it? It's a lot harder to embody it. Now, when I hear that word embody, I think I need to take it into the world. I need to live my life as though I am connected, as opposed to just talk about it. I like to joke, you know, how many people have read a self-help book but not done any of the, exercises at the end of the chapter? Yeah? Yeah, I hear the laughter, but I don't see any hands. I'm right there with you. It's easier though, isn't it? It's a lot harder to embody that. So I experience this non-dual self myself most easily when I'm in that mindset that positive psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi calls the flow state. And have you ever experienced that state of mind where everything that you did felt easy and effortless? Yeah. Even though you might have been in the middle of some really hairy challenge. I recall a time years ago when I was at a good friend's destination wedding in the Caribbean. And we decided on that first day we were there that we were going to do some deep sea fishing because, you know, that's what the guys do when they get together is they go out and try and catch fish in the ocean. That's totally a stereotype, by the way. So it was a lovely experience other than the seasickness. It was very choppy that day, and we all ate a little bit too much for breakfast. However, there was a challenge that arose. There was a giant jug of probably made in a bathtub Caribbean rum. I tried to avoid it because it looked like motor oil to me. And I'm like, I just was seasick. I don't need this in me either. But the groom, on the other hand, found a new friend in that jug. And he got so intoxicated that by the end of this trip, he didn't really seem to know what was going on anymore. In fact, we were all getting kind of worried for him. So to boil down this long and rather challenging story, there was this moment in this drama where we actually had to try to keep him in his room for his own good so that he wouldn't get in trouble, he wouldn't hurt himself. And I gotta tell you, I was so frustrated. I was feeling resentful. I was telling myself this story like, I just paid all this money to come on this trip and this destination wedding, and I just want to have fun and hang out and go swimming and be on the beach, and now I'm dealing with this. And there's this moment where I looked in his eyes, and I saw reflected back to me this fear. There was this vulnerability that was coming back to me, and he didn't know what was going on, but there was a part of him that was able to connect to me in that moment. And it's like my non-dual self was sort of sitting in the background watching my ego go off in the way that egos do, and then it just sort of gently pushed that ego away and said, here I am. Instantly, my resentment went away. My fears went away. My struggle went away. And in that moment, I felt this bizarre, it was bizarre because of how poignant it was, this feeling of peace. This feeling that, wow, this is not a great situation, but everything's going to be okay. I felt compassion for my friend. I wanted to help my friend, not from my ego, but from the depths of my spirit. So the other good thing that came out of this, because, oh boy, I'm losing everything here. Well, I don't need those pages anyway. The other good thing that comes out of this whole non-dual self exercise is that not only do we find our way into that compassion, but then that wholeness and compassion is what leads us to do the things that we need to do. This is similar to the story in the Bhagavad Gita where Lord Krishna is asking, Arjuna is asking Lord Krishna, like, but shouldn't I just go off into the woods and meditate for the rest of my life? And Krishna's like, no, you got work to do. And I like to think of that as how our ego self sometimes tries to reason with that larger self within us, thinking that it knows what to do. But the truth is, the thing that really knows what to do within us is that wise self, that non-dual self. So in my destination wedding, my non-dual self was able to help me get an ambulance for my friend so that he could go to the clinic and get care there. It was able to help to console his mom, who was understandably very concerned about her son. And it was able to keep me going on an empty stomach for about 16 hours without even realizing that, wow, I'm actually hungry. That's the power of the non-dual self. It wasn't that I just had this epiphany and then I went off and spent the rest of the vacation in meditation. No, it put me to work. How cool is that? So, where am I? How can we meet this non-dual self? Anybody thinking that right now? Yeah? How many here have met your non-dual self? Okay. Some of you had. Good. This will be a fun exercise. Oftentimes we're taught that this is something that we need to be in meditation practice for years and years and years and years to get to. And that's not wrong. That's a valid path. And those traditional forms of meditation, like mindfulness meditation, where we focus on the breath, they can get us there, but sometimes they can take a significant amount of time before we even get a single glimpse of that non-dual self. For some, we don't even get there. It's not the right path for us to have that experience. So there's another way that I've discovered that I'd like to share with you. And you heard from that reading today from Lock Kelly a little bit about it, and it's called effortless mindfulness. And this method is designed to give us glimpses of that non-dual self that is already within us. It doesn't require us to sit for hours in a day, in an ashram, sitting in our lotus position or sitting zazen. It allows us to almost, I hate to use the word bypass because I am not one to talk about, to encourage spiritual bypass. I am one to like generally face problems when I see them, but it really is kind of a short circuiting of our thinking mind is what it does, where we find our way back into that pure awareness. And so this method of effortless mindfulness is rooted in the non-dual teachings of Buddhism, Hinduism, many of the Eastern wisdom traditions that brought us the meditation practices that many of us are engaging in today. And Locke Kelly tells us in his book, The Way of Effortless Mindfulness, he says this: the premise of the direct approach in all meditative traditions is that the awake, loving nature we are seeking is already here within us, and it can be accessed immediately. This is also what Ernest Holmes teaches us in The Science of Mind with that word effortless. There's a part where Ernest is talking about how we do spiritual mind treatment, and he cautions us against trying to will or to effort our way into manifesting the things that we are treating for. And I think, even though he doesn't use this language, I think he knew that that efforting, that willing, that stuff that's all coming from our small self, right? It's like, oh, I've got to get it, I've got to get it. It's grasping. And in that grasping is where we start to get into mischief. And we start to have issues, and we start to wonder, like, I was doing this treatment, and man, I was so into it, but why didn't it manifest? I don't get it. It's the willing, the efforting, the just trying to grasp too hard takes us out of our non-dual self. And so that's where the effortlessness comes in. Now, accessing this self is an experience that I really can't put into words. And I'm sure those who raised their hands before who've had those glimpses can agree that it's impossible to put this experience into words. So rather than talking about it, I thought it would be fun for us to practice a glimpse. And I've created my own sort of path based on some of the things that I picked out from Locke Kelly. And he provides a wide variety of ways to get there, by the way. But it should give you an idea of the effortless nature of the non-dual self and how we can get in touch with it. And what we're going to do is we're going to cultivate what he calls awake awareness. Now, you may not get there with it today, and that's okay. As with any practice, we try it. If it doesn't work after we've practiced it a few times, then pick a new practice. That's what Ernest Holmes encourages us to do. Be open at the top and try it. Don't take my word for it. But if you do, that's going to be fun. So, I'm going to begin us with an open-eyed exercise. So let's just begin as we are. First, let us take a deep breath together. Breathing in and out. And as you breathe in, simply become aware, without any effort, of the feeling of that air as it passes through your nostrils. The feeling of that air as it expands your lungs. The feeling of that oxygen as it brings new life to your body. And now, because your eyes are open, notice what you see around you. Perhaps look around this room. Be effortlessly aware of all that you see, letting your eyes drink in. Your mind may want to label things, and if it does, that's okay. You can simply witness your mind as well. Now I invite you to close your eyes and become aware of the sounds in this room. One of those sounds is my voice guiding you. Effortlessly be aware of the sound of my voice. Now listen to the silence between my words. And now I invite you to become aware of the physical sensations in your body. Notice any feelings in your body as though you're watching them with a flashlight. Directing this flashlight is easy and effortless, and so it is to notice the feelings in our body. And now sinking into the space between these things that we are aware of now. Effortlessly allow your awareness to become aware of itself, as though your awareness is seeing itself in a mirror. And simply sit with the awareness of this aware self. Now, oftentimes with our awareness, it can feel as though that awareness is tied to our body, particularly tied to our head. I invite you now, knowing that you don't need to know how to do this because your awareness already knows how to do this, allow your awareness to expand beyond your body and to fill this entire room. What is it like to be aware as this room and all of the people in it? What is it like to be aware of our live stream and all of the people watching online? Allow that awareness to expand beyond your physical body. I invite you to take note of how this feels. If you happen to feel a little more peaceful, connected, enlivened, then congratulations. That's your non-dual self. Just take this moment to sit with that feeling of awake awareness and all of the joyful benefits that it brings. All right, I invite you to find your way back to our room, back to your body. I know we could probably sit in that feeling all day, but at some point the service does need to end. And when you feel ready, go ahead and open your eyes and smile. So I'm curious, who here felt something shift during this exercise? Okay, great. And if you didn't, you can always try again. That's okay too. The idea with this awake awareness practice is that it is a practice, and that the more glimpses that we get of this pure awareness within us, the more we begin to live our lives from that awareness as opposed to from the trappings of our ego, from our small self. We begin to see a world that is interconnected as opposed to a world that is trapped in division and separation. In fact, we don't even get rid of our small self ego in this practice. That's what's cool about this. Rather, we kind of retire it. We give it a break from all of the crazy making that it tends to do in our lives. And we just say, hey, all right, you're good at this particular job, ego. Why don't you go do that? And it's like, okay. And you're good at that job. Why don't you go do that? Oh, okay. And our wise self then becomes the director of our life. So as I conclude here, I want to share my belief. My belief is that the thing that our world is looking for right now, our world that really looks like it's addicted to division, is finding a way to interact, to solve our problems from non-dual awareness, from this awake awareness that cannot see division. It only sees oneness. It only sees wholeness. And while we just touched a little bit on what's possible today, I hope that you'll continue this practice and see what glimpses of the divine you get, because that divine's within you. It's always there, and it is unconditional love. I know that the more of us that are able to awaken to this non-dual self, to this pure awareness, this awareness that can only see good, this awareness that's wise, that knows what to do, that's how we transform the often ugly challenges that we see in our lives and the world into beautiful pearls of growth, acceptance, and understanding. So shall we take that into prayer? Cool. All right, so I invite us all to turn within to that non-dual self that didn't go anywhere. In fact, it's still here within each and every one of us. And allow that spacious awareness to fill us up. As I allow that spacious awareness to fill me up in recognition of this divine perfection that is the source of creation itself. How good it is to recognize that, to know it, to know that good is here now, to know that wholeness is here now, to know that love and wisdom are here now. And how good it is to know that I am one with that. That part of me that recognizes that I am one, recognizes the oneness of each and every person here and on the live stream. We are one with that wisdom, with that love, with that wholeness, with that perfection. It is truly the stuff that makes up our very being. And so how good it is to claim and declare here and now that our wise self, our non-dual self, that it is here now. And I simply speak my word as a gentle door opening, allowing it to come forth for each and every one of us. Knowing that as we move forward in our day-to-day lives, that we are able to see the glimpses of this inner divinity, this inner awareness that is beyond all thought. I know that our lives are enriched and uplifted, because how could they not be when this unconditional love pours forth through our heart, through our very being? I say here now that as we do this work, so too does our work enrich the world around us, bringing unity where we see division, bringing wholeness where we see brokenness. I know that the truth is that there is love and love alone, and that is what I know is bubbling forth through each and every one of our hearts right here, right now. And I bless us on each of our journeys, knowing that those glimpses are not very far away. And so I invite them forth, that non-dual self forth, to guide us in our lives, to enrich us, to fill us with its unconditional love, knowing that there's no limit to the love that we can feel, that we can embrace, that we can accept in our lives. And so there's nothing left for me to share other than my gratitude to know that this prayer is fulfilled, that this word has done what it needs to do. And with my gratitude, I release it gently into the law that always says, yes, my beloveds, yes. And I invite you all to join me in saying, and so it is.
I walk in God in all I do. I walk in God in all